Tiger fans, Adem Yze was on SEN Breakfast this morning with Tim Watson and Gary Lyon for a bit of an interview, so we thought we'd take a listen to some of the points made by Yze and then give some comment and talk about some of the answers, because there was some really interesting bits in here, especially in relation to, I guess more so last year, with the way in which some of the players left and how it was all handled, which I actually found quite fascinating. But we'll start off with this one from Tim Watson, just in relation to what we're looking to do for this upcoming trade and draft period.
Looking forward, obviously you've added a lot of great young talent to your list. How active might you be in being able to sort of cherry pick and find other players out there that you want to add to your list during this off-season period?
Oh, no, we're really clear that we're going to hit the draft again. We've got two early draft picks again. We're looking for young talent to bring in, and for this season we'll do that again. And we might look to free agents and things like that maybe next year moving forward. So right now, like I said, last year we brought a lot of young talent in. We're going to do that again this year, and look to start to think of those things next year.
So I guess going to the draft makes sense when you've got the two picks that we've got. I'm sure within those two picks, though, there's still an element of trade that can happen, but maybe by way of splitting picks, and maybe not necessarily in relation to players, unless there's something else that happens at the last minute, which I guess you've got to listen to. But I think the vibe and feeling all along has been that 2026 was going to be a bit better timing for us to go after free agents. You've got someone like Zach Butters, who's probably going to be the prime target for a lot of clubs, not just us, that will be in that free agency window for next year. So I don't mind getting another year under the belt of all the youngsters and the second and third year players, another layer of the game plan added to sort of build on it and then attack free agency. It kind of did always feel like, especially when we're talking about A-grade talent, I always felt that this year was too soon to bring in an A-grader. I wouldn't have been against it if the opportunity arose and we were able to execute it, don't get me wrong. But from a timing perspective, it did always feel like that next year made more sense from an A-grade perspective. This year, I still wouldn't be against bringing in, if there was some additional role players or players that can fill needs that might help propel other players forward if opportunities arose. I still wouldn't be against that. You don't have to always bring in A-grade players. You can bring in other needs that can help sort of fill gaps in your side. But if the club don't think we need to do that this year just yet, I'll back them in. I mean, look, based on the age profile, I think there's a bit of a gap that does need to be filled. But the club obviously want to go through the natural course of rebuilding with the talent they've picked up, which I can understand too.
What do you? What in terms of the areas that you need to bolster? Where do you think they are at right now?
We think we filled a lot of the gaps that we needed. We brought in obviously Harry Armstrong and Jonty Fall and Tom Sims, so we've got a lot of height and we've got a lot of key defenders. So our key position stocks are really strong at the moment. We're just really young. Mm-hmm. Yep. Obviously the talent with Sammy Lawler and Josh Smillie and Taj Houghton. So we feel like we've filled a lot of gaps with our youth. We're looking to maybe bring in, like I said, some talent through this draft that will complement what we brought in last year. So right now the gaps are just the exposure and experience that we need these players to have, and obviously feel on an AFL field.
I mean, so he didn't quite touch on the type of player that we're looking to bring in, but if you sort of look at process of elimination, that it doesn't sound like we'll need to bring in a key forward, which I think makes sense to everybody. Key defenders we're pretty well stocked for, which we knew anyway. So I guess by default, it sort of means that we'd be looking at more sort of midfielders or players who can play through midfield, half forward, running types, which I guess we were all on the same page on anyway. And I suppose the overwhelming piece there from Yze was that it's just more about getting more experience and game time into these players at the senior level to fast track their development essentially. But I guess now you'd be sort of shocked if we did target a key forward. I mean, that would completely blow my mind if we did that. And I don't think there's really one there at our picks anyway, so it's not really going to be a concern. But it does seem like it'll be a midfield-centric or running player type draft, which I think we all know we need and want. So the next part that was discussed with Gary and Yze was in relation to our past players in terms of Bolton, Rioli, Baker and Graham, and just how it all transpired with them leaving the club and the conversations that were had, I guess in light of what's happened recently with Zach Merritt and Jai Simpkin and players like that, where it's been very, very abrupt and really damaging for both player and club. I won't play the audio from that part of the interview because it is very long. You can go and listen to SEN's website to check out the full audio of Yze's response. But it was fascinating to hear and to learn that in particular when talking about the free agency with Baker and Jack Graham, that there were some pretty upfront conversations from the start of the year. And while the players didn't necessarily straight out say at the start of the year, Baker anyway, that he was going to leave, Yze was left with a bit of an inkling that was going to happen. And Yze's view was that when it comes to free agency, it is all about having that mature conversation about this is what you're planning to do, but also just making sure that the player can also reiterate to the current playing group that even though this might be his future decision, he's still here for the now, playing for the team, which is, I think Baker was always a hard-on-sleeve player. So it's interesting to hear that. And then Shea Bolton, obviously, and Dan Rioli being contracted players. So it was mentioned, Yze mentioned that Bolton approached him with about 8 rounds to go and sort of flagged that he wanted to get back home to Perth for family reasons. And I think Bolton had been speaking to Blair Hartley prior, so Yze had kind of caught wind of what was going on. And yeah, the club, as all clubs do, I mean, we're not in the market to make other teams better sides, but we are respectful of what, Bolton and Rioli did for the club, the circumstances they've got regarding family and things like that, and that if we can get a deal that works for us, that we would facilitate it. And I think, you look at the Rioli and the Bolton thing and just how mature of a way that was for those two players to exit the club. It sort of makes me proud in a way that that's how it went down and that's how it was handled. It was no fuss. It was respectful for the players and their families. The players were respectful to us as a club. There was no snake work or going behind each other's back, like what we're seeing play out now currently in the media for other teams. And the deal gets done. The players get to where they want to go. We get looked after and everyone's a winner. So I think our club's really strong in that part of the footy world, and I think it's a really good thing to have. And yeah, it was just really interesting to hear Yze talk about, I suppose, how that sort of all transpired over the course of last year. And just tacking on to that, Gary asked a good follow-up question that, hypothetically speaking, if a deal couldn't have been brokered with Fremantle for Shea Bolton, would we have been prepared to have him come back in the door and play and all that kind of stuff? And Yze said, well, yeah, of course. I mean, he's our player who's contracted and we have to get the best deal for us. And I guess the beauty of our situation is because it was done so professionally and with love and respect for each party, that in that example, the player can come back into the club and reintegrate with the playing group and get on with things and play football again. When you go down the path of what Merritt and even Simpkin and players like that have done, Merritt especially, there's a point of no return. You simply cannot walk back into the club. Even Charlie Curnow is getting to that point as well. So I'm very glad that we were down the path that if we didn't get looked after, there was still a way in which it would be acceptable and okay for them to come back into the club and continue to play football for us, which I think was a really good place to be in. This next bit coming up from Yze is really, really interesting, and I think it's something that fans maybe struggled or failed to understand a little bit when getting frustrated with our game style, game plan, tactics, whatever you want to call it, last season. And it's something that we try to talk about a bit on the show just to provide context, but I think when you hear it from the horse's mouth, maybe it makes a bit more sense. And it's in relation to the actual time that the coaches get with these kids and players to try and develop and embed a game plan into them. People just think that these players should be able to pick up an entire game plan in one off season. I think this is where it's really important for people to understand that the way we played football in 2025 probably shouldn't be the way we play football in 2026, because there's going to be other layers to the game plan added on. And I've talked about this a few times on the show and videos, that you've got to look at a game plan like a tiered cake. We're at base level this year. They could only implement and teach so much, and Yze's about to explain why. And then from there, you progress up. They'll learn that part, get it right, move up to the next level this year, next level, and so on and so forth. And that's why rebuilds don't just happen overnight. You do need 4 or 5 years to see the fully fledged game plan in work with players at the right age bracket and games played bracket before you can actually make a call on what's worked, what hasn't. And you can learn bits and pieces along the way. But this coming up right now is a really good explanation from Yze as to why these game plans take such a long time to implement and why we as fans probably need to show a bit of patience in this area.
The hardest thing for a young coach right now, and even when you're thinking about Stephen King, our players, if you miss the finals, they have 100 and something days off. And they come back on November the 24th and you can't get them back any quicker. And when I say can't get them back any quicker, they're training, but they're not, you can't educate a game plan.
You can't have any contact with them.
Well, not any contact. Like, there's obviously personal contact, but we can't send information and we can't coach them on the run during this time.
Yeah.
So it's a really tough time of the year because, like I said, they've got 100 and something days off and they come back for 20 odd days. So you might only have 16 sessions, and you're trying to fast track development. And when you've got young players, trying to cram all that information in before Christmas is really tough. So
that is an unbelievable challenge, and I'll be interested to get your thoughts because no one's probably better placed given the makeup of your list in the past 2 years. So you get a kid in the draft, which is, what date is the draft? I don't even know. It's in late November.
Late November.
So the first time you get him into your club is, at the end of November. Then you've got to try and, indoctrinate him into, he's been in the under-18 system. So then you've got to say, here's a senior program, you're going to play with men. This is, I've spoke to Chris Connolly about this often. He says, then you expect them in the space of 2.5 months to be competing against men in a practice match situation. It is such a challenge. Do you think it has to change?
Well, no doubt. Even that, like our older players, our first to 4-year players start on November the 10th, and then the draft is late November. So we've got players training before the draft.
So
we've got 8 or 9 players in.
Is trying to get them to teach them how to lift weights properly.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. They've got to become AFL footballers, let alone educate a game plan. So
they're going to speak more about it in a sec, but it just goes to show how difficult it is for coaches to try and implement what they want to implement in such a short period of time when they have so little time with the players. And while they do have their programs and things like that to keep fit, that's not really the issue. The issue is about being able to play to the structures, the game plan, the running patterns, I do this if X, Y, and Z happens. All those types of things don't just happen and can't be taught straight away. So it's a process. And obviously they'll benefit a little bit more this year because they can come back, or they start a fraction earlier, as Yze just said, than what the draftees will. But it just really puts into perspective how little time they have. I know they hit the January pre-season, but then before you know it, you've got practice games, and the season starts. So it's just really not a lot of time to get done what they want to get done.
Yeah. We've got a really clear plan on maximising every minute, because that does matter. So, and that's not just on the training field. So there's guys, and as you said, you've got young players coming in, they're understanding how to play against men, but we've got to understand how they learn. So they all learn differently. So you're trying to manage your program around that so that we're utilising every minute in our program, that it sinks in, because we don't have a lot of time. So, I've heard other coaches talk about the same sort of thing. But it is a challenge.
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge straight out, and that's why I think we need to be, and this is really why we're probably a bit more understanding of the situation. I think as supporters, we all need to be, and it's probably why I get frustrated when I see people lashing out saying, sack Yze, and he hasn't done a good enough job, and why aren't we doing this? It's like, hang on, give the guy and the whole team and the club a chance to actually implement properly what they want to implement. I just feel like people expect a new coach to take over and they can impart their wisdom and knowledge and game plan to everybody in the space of 3 months, then everyone's on the same page and away we go and hit the ground running. It's just not reality. It's not how it works. So if you're frustrated with what you see sometimes, maybe just take stock and just remember how difficult it is to be able to impart what they want to impart to get them up to that level. And it's not something we may see for another year or two to come. So just keep that in mind. This next bit, they had a text to come through asking about Josh Smillie, always the $1 million question. So Yze had a bit to say about Smil.
Yeah, he's travelling well. He was out there today training, or he will be out there today. Seen him over the last few days. He got his body to a position last year. It was really unlucky and unfortunate that he didn't get to play VFL finals, but he was really close to obviously getting that exposure late in the year. But yeah, he's a highly talented kid, and realistically, we've got 2 first-round picks coming in this year, and we can add Josh to that as well. He hasn't tasted AFL yet, and
I think we've all felt the same way. Obviously, we would have loved to have seen Josh Smillie play footy this year in 2025, but it wasn't to be. But as Yze said, and is it the right way to view it? I'm not sure, but it's how I think it in reality sort of feels, is that on top of the 2 draftees that we'll bring in this year at a minimum, we also get a third prospect in Josh Smillie, which is going to be really good to see him playing footy next year. And it's good to hear that he's out in the track still working on all the conditioning and getting his body right and doing all the right things he needs to do. And it just kind of shows the professionalism of him and how dedicated he is to wanting to get himself right to be able to get out there and play next year, which is really good. Next one, another text came through about Tyler Young. Very good topical point, given that he's out of contract and there are a couple of teams chasing his signature, including us, might I add. So we'll listen to see what Yze has to say on Tyler Young.
to Youngie's credit, the way he finished the season has opened the eyes of a lot of clubs. So right now we've put an offer to him. Hopefully it's good enough that he decides to stay. He's gone away with the boys overseas for the next few days. He's going to take a little bit of time to think about it. But like I said, to credit to him, other teams are seeing what we're seeing in him. And so like I said, hopefully he decides to stay. And if not, once again, that's the landscape we live in. And if he sees some future elsewhere, we'll have to deal with that in the coming days.
Interesting. There's not much more Yze can say on that, but I guess sometimes you're used to hearing an answer that maybe says, yeah, we're really confident we're going to get his signature, but that didn't have that vibe to it. And like I sort of said in a previous video, from what I understand, is that West Coast is a team who has put forward a really nice offer to him. And we've said all along that, from what we can tell, that Tyler's preference would be to stay at Richmond if we can match or hopefully even just get near what other offers are. But you can also understand from his perspective why it might be enticing to leave, because as Yze said, he had a really good back half of the year and other teams have taken notice. And at 27 years old, footy's a short career for some people and he started a bit later than others. And this is his chance to set himself up as best he can and his family. So you can't begrudge the guy for trying to do that as well. So it'd be interesting to see what happens when he comes back and has to make a call. I think from a Richmond fan perspective, I think we all hope that we keep him. But yeah, if he does go, hopefully it's to somewhere that can compensate us nicely. You can't be wishing and demanding for too much, I guess. But interesting to see how that one plays out.
Jacob Blight that you just delisted. A lot of text messages coming through asking you what happened there.
A few people sending through texts about Jacob Blight as well. This answer, I've not heard this yet, so this will be fascinating to hear what this answer is from Yze in regards to Jacob Blight and his departure from Richmond.
Yeah, it's a hard one. Some of that can be just timing and circumstance. So Blighty, unfortunately, was out of contract, and he was a mid-season pick. And based on the draft hand that we had last year and the players that we brought in, we're stocked with a lot of key position players, and he got tipped out. And got pushed out last year and couldn't force his way back in, unfortunately. So right now it's just a balance of who we've got on our list and who was out of contract. And unfortunately, he was the guy that missed out. So I think he might get an opportunity at another team.
And
look, there was still some games where I didn't quite understand how he wasn't back in the side. I thought he was doing some really good and solid things, and his VFL form is pretty solid as well. I still think there's a little bit more to this one than just the footy side of things. But we definitely were well stocked in key position players. That is absolute fact. And the fact we obviously re-signed Campbell Gray as well, and we've got Tyler Young, who's obviously up in the air, but we do definitely have coverage in those areas, which does make sense. And the final question from Gary was just in relation to Troy Chaplin and if we were going after him. And Yze just said that he definitely did source or ask the question because he had worked with him at the D's, and that at the point in time where Yze got there, the D's defence was doing really, really well, and that was thanks to Chaplin's work. But they since found out that he's still got a year to run on the contract, and I know when we talk about player contracts, they seem to be easier to break. They seem to mean next to nothing, but I have a funny feeling, without knowing for certain, but I feel like the coaching rank contracts hold a little bit more weight in a lot of cases. So it sounds like that one's been case closed for the Troy Chaplin one, but they wanted to ask the question nonetheless, just to see if there was any willingness or desire to want to move. But there you go. That's a wrap from the Yze interview on SEN. Some really good takes from that. It was good to hear from Yze at length today in regards to all of those topics. And we look forward to draft time and trade time if we do anything there with the draft picks. And then obviously we roll into pre-season in November. So a few months to go yet, but make sure you stick around and like and subscribe for more Tiger content. And until next time, go Tigers.